It's Formula One Focus, our weekly look at the world of Formula One. And at last, Hendrik, it's time to start racing again. Thank goodness. This has been the longest summer holiday I can remember. Welcome back.
Thank you. Well, the interesting thing is that it's been 4 weeks break now. Now we're going to have four races in 5 weekends, if I'm not mistaken, and then we're going to have another month of no racing. So this
Is it?
calendar certainly, yeah, if you look at it now, we've got the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend, the 25th of August. Then a week later, we've got the Italian Grand Prix. Then a week break, and then the 15th and 22nd of September, we have Azerbaijan and Singapore. And then the next race
Yeah.
after the 22nd of September is the United States Grand Prix at Austin on the 20th of October.
No,
So
no. So they're skipping
very,
one
very,
fortnight. Why would that be? How
I have no
was
idea.
something
I think,
cancelled or something?
well, they have to take things into account, like I think the Olympics probably played a role, all kinds of other stuff.
Mm.
I don't know exactly why, because what happens then is that they leave this gap, and then that means that they've got three in a row at some point, or at
Mm.
more than one point over the season. No, I don't know the answer to that, but that is what we are heading
Yeah.
for. So we're very busy, end of August and into September. So I think it's going to be a crucial period for the championship, for both championships, the next four races. Certainly McLaren is challenging Red Bull, but yes, they are in danger from McLaren, for the constructors championship, more so I think than Max Verstappen is in the drivers championship. But it's certainly going to be interesting to see how, especially these two, and one has to say also, of course, the likes of Mercedes and possibly Ferrari, how they shape up the next four races, because the next four races, including this weekend's Dutch Grand Prix, are on very different tracks. And if you're good on more than one type of circuit, then normally you are very good during the course of a season. We've got 10 races to go. That's almost a full season for a few years ago.
It's interesting. I read somewhere this week that the Red Bull, as it's being developed and it's now being challenged more and more by the guys catching up with them, is becoming more and more track specific. Exactly like you said, it works in certain tracks and it doesn't work at all in others. Whereas the McLaren seems to be a bit more of a all rounder. It works on most circuits with the least amount of adjustments and the likes. So if we're looking at, just as a matter of interest, looking at this weekend's Zandvoort track and then the Dutch Grand Prix, what kind of a track is that? What would we expect? Typically, you mentioned to me Max has dominated this race since its inception.
Well, yeah, since it came back, Max has won from pole position. So is he going to do it again this weekend? The weather plays a role quite often there because of the location of the track, right next to the sea. It literally means sandy track. So they've got this sort of small climate, the area around the track, that is very unpredictable. And the weather forecasters that I have seen for this weekend is for very mixed weather. Strong winds, very strong winds apparently, and that in itself can just throw anybody's performance off the track, literally, quite often. And rain that could play a role on all 3 days, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, whether the teams are going to be able to find any kind of stable data set, I think that is up in the air, quite literally. And that could have a huge effect on how the race unfolds. Last year, of course, we saw similar conditions and similar situations, and one of the consequences of last year's situation was the crash that Daniel Ricciardo had, breaking his arm or his hand. And that gave Liam Lawson the opportunity for the next 4 or 5 races to stand in for him and to make his mark in Formula One. And that's another theme that we need to look at also for the rest of the season. Is anybody going to find a seat for Liam Lawson this year? Is Red Bull going to stick with Checo? Or is he going to, last for another few races until it is quite clear that he cannot make any contribution to the championships, both championships? And will they then parachute in Liam Lawson in there, or Daniel Ricciardo for that matter? So that's something that's very interesting to look forward to this year, for the rest of the season. Yeah. I don't know how I got onto that, but yeah, Zandvoort this weekend should be very interesting. And the question is, will Max Verstappen continue with his domination there?
Well, on that subject, I see Gunther Steiner has said that he was convinced that Sergio Perez was going to get fired over the summer break. All indications that from what he heard inside the paddock was that was going to happen. There were a couple of slip-ups here or there. The Red Bull website in Holland basically saying that Daniel Ricciardo is Max Verstappen's teammate, little things like that that seems to hint at plans that might have been changed at the last moment, maybe at not letting Perez go. And that makes you wonder. We talked about what's happening at Red Bull at the moment, like they are sort of coming apart at the seams. That just seems to indicate a little bit more of this, running around like a headless chicken at the moment. There seemed to be a lot of conflict and things being a little bit out of control there.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it that strong. I would say instability, yes, absolutely, but it's a bit strong to say they're running around like a headless chicken. But anyway, yeah,
Sure.
we've mentioned this before. There's certainly a lack of stability there, and as the pressure increases in the championship, as the end of the season draws closer, that gap closes in. Yes, the pressure is going to ramp up inside the team, and what effect will that have on the team? Um, Max certainly showed on more than one occasion, and especially in Hungary, last time in Hungary, that the pressure does get to him on the track as well. And I've also, I think, made the point on a previous occasion that Max has had such a relatively easy run the last few seasons. The last time he was under serious pressure was in the previous dispensation in 2021, when him and Lewis Hamilton had all those numerous altercations on the track. And since then, the new dispensation came in, and Red Bull was completely dominant, and Max was even more dominant than that. And in 22, 23, and for the first few races in 24, he's had it easy, but not anymore. So, that pressure is certainly getting to them. I don't know whether they're going to. I think I've made the point also before. I don't know that they are actually going to fire Sergio Perez for, before the end of the season. Not talking about contracts or anything like that. You have to know that your alternative is better. If you're going to get rid of a guy mid-season, you've got to know that whomever you replace him with is got to be better and has got to be able to deliver from the word go, right from the get-go. Will either Liam Lawson or Daniel Ricciardo or even Tsunoda be able to, be parachuted in there and score points immediately and play the number 2 role that they need Sergio Perez to play? I don't think so, to be honest. So I think they are probably going to be better off to stay with him for this season and then let him go at the end of this season, despite the fact that they've got a contract with him. Although I understand that that's an option, but be it as it may, I think they will probably be better off to stay with Sergio.
That's quite an interesting thing that you said, and it makes a lot of sense. The fact that you let him go when there's a clearly better candidate to replace him with. And it brings me neatly to the situation at Williams. You and I have been talking before we started recording about the probable, imminent, maybe, we don't know, perhaps announcement of Kimi Antonelli going to drive for Mercedes next year. And the rumors about him stepping into the shoes of Logan Sargent temporarily at Williams, sort of just to ease him into the world of Formula One, just don't want to seem to go away. What's your take on that?
I don't know. I don't know enough to say either way that yes, he's going to replace Sargent, or no, he's definitely not going to. It really depends on what Toto Wolff wants from him when he announces him as a team member, as a teammate to George Russell for next year, and when they want to do that. The way I understand it is that they are not too concerned about his actual results in Formula 2 at the moment. They are far more impressed by his technical feedback. That's Antonelli. His technical feedback and his maturity behind the wheel. And I think that they are going to, okay, let me put my cards on the table. I don't think that they're going to send him to Williams again. It is disruptive with the majority of the races of the season behind you, minority still ahead of you. It is disruptive in a team to all of a sudden, change drivers. There's a very, very intimate or close, let's put it this, a close relationship between the drivers and the technical team behind them. And that is a big factor in how successful they are or not, be it however it is. But, to just drop somebody new in there that nobody knows how he works or how he communicates, or he doesn't know how they work and how they communicate and what they, that sort of thing is very disruptive. And I don't know that is going to be such a good idea for Williams. So yes, that's a long way of answering. I don't think that Antonelli is going to go to Williams before the end of the season. I think they might, Mercedes might well announce him before the end of the season as the Hamilton replacement. And he's probably, and I haven't checked this, but he's probably still got one or two Formula One free practice sessions at Mercedes left until the end of the season, and I'm pretty sure that's where they're going to put him in, and then let him show what he can do there.
Yeah, the questions, we don't know whether they're going to happen or not. It's going to happen or not. I just wondered about like you just explained to me, does it make any sense to bring him in? If it does, if it would have made sense to say he had no experience and you need to bring him in to make sure he doesn't drown when he gets thrown into deep end next year. But he's done several tests before. He's driven the previous generation cars on certain tracks, and Mercedes was clearly impressed with him there. So yeah, it doesn't make sense in that sense. Like we talked about Perez, there's a clearly better candidate, or it does make sense in a certain practical way. There's no indication of that. So yeah, I agree with you. It's not really going to happen. So while we're on the subject, some of the driver's seats have not been filled yet for next year. Audi and Alpine, some of the prominent ones. I see Flavio Briatore now says he's not worried about Alpine. He'll announce the drivers later. He needs to sort out the rest of the stuff first. I suppose that means the engines and the likes. And I see Alpine is planning to bring quite a few substantial upgrades on the car towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I think Flavio is absolutely right there. I think they've got bigger priorities than to announce Jack Doohan. So yes, it makes sense. Get the big elements right. Make sure that you have the engine next year. They are obviously talking to Mercedes as an engine supplier for next year, and get the technical departments right. Get the management the positions filled that you need to fill, and then you can do the obvious thing and bring in your junior driver for the second position. They don't need to announce him now. He probably knows that already, so he doesn't. He's not going to fly the coop. Quite frankly, I think that's not a bad choice. Jack Doohan certainly comes from very strong motorsport background, and certainly has impressed as a junior. So and as a reserve driver in that team. So yes, I think strangely, I agree with Flavio Briatore on this matter. So let them get their house in order before they start fiddling around with silly little things like their second driver.
The other team that I just mentioned is Audi. A lot of rumors about certain American drivers and stuff American drivers racing in America. That's absolute nonsense. But Valtteri Bottas posted a little bit of a teaser there with an Audi with a number 77 pasted on the side of it, the Audi car. So that seems to be a bit of an indication maybe. And I think that makes sense to me. He's experienced. He knows the team. He's a good driver. He's showed it at Mercedes. If he gets the proper equipment, he can do very well. Sauber at the moment is a bit of a joke. I see there's a bit of concern about the fact that Sauber is so far removed from where Audi wants to be, but Audi needs to sort that out. They've got the resources to do it. But in terms of the driver, I think for me, Bottas makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let's also not forget, of course, that Audi only officially comes in 2026. So there's no real rush for them from their point of view to announce. They've already announced Nico Hülkenberg, so they've already got a top-line driver. And we all know Nico is actually a far better driver than his results in Formula One show. That guy is absolutely top-notch as far as his abilities are concerned. So, they've got a top driver. Valtteri Bottas makes sense from various points of views. He's a 10-time race winner, as you pointed out. When he was at Mercedes, he had the equipment. He was able to win races. It's not that easy necessarily. If you even have a fast car, ask Sergio Perez. It's not that easy to just go out and win, even if you have the best car. So he's got 10 victories behind his name, Valtteri Bottas. I think that picture with the Audi was probably one of his tongue-in-cheek moments. He does these sort of things. let's not forget that he's already put out more than one, I think, a calendar of himself in the nude.
Yeah.
And very much tongue in cheek, and very tasteful, one has to say. Not that I have one, but I've seen some of the pictures. But anyway, so that's the kind of thing that Valtteri does. Put it out there. He knows what effect it's going to have, especially in cucumber time, like we've spoken. When the news is very thin on the ground, put it out there. Why not? Maybe that puts a little bit of pressure on Audi to come to a decision, because he doesn't know whether he's going to race next year or not. I don't know. Well, obviously him and Joe are the two possibilities for Audi, but I cannot see the Chinese driver going there, to be honest.
Taking a look at the bigger picture in terms of the Constructors' Champion and the Drivers' Championship, starting with the Constructors' Championship, McLaren seems to be, on a roll here if they can get their act together in terms of strategy. Because I think they've had several races that they could have won, but they screwed up. But as Zak Brown eloquently put it, they have to. He actually quoted Toto Wolff saying that you're learning in the heat of the moment. You can't learn something if you're not involved in it, and that's what McLaren is now doing at the moment. They're learning while leading. They haven't led a race for many years. So if McLaren can get their act together, the car is probably good enough. The drivers are good enough. Red Bull is definitely on their back foot. They've got one hand tied behind their back with Perez. That's my opinion. I think there's a very good chance that McLaren might, give them a good run for their money in terms of winning the Constructors' Championship towards the end of the year.
Absolutely, far more so than I think that Max is under pressure for the Drivers' Championship. Just correct me if I'm wrong. The lead that Red Bull has at the moment is 42 points in the constructors' standings. So that is absolutely doable for with 10 races to go. For any team that's only 42 points behind, that is absolutely doable. You've got a maximum of 34, I think, and that's not including the three sprint races that are still on the cards for the rest of the calendar. More points are available, so it is absolutely doable for especially, I think, McLaren to catch them, being just only 42 points behind them. It's also, I think, doable for the likes of Mercedes. Probably Ferrari, if they can get the bouncing situation sorted out, although I think that's probably a little bit doubtful. But let's say McLaren and Mercedes are going to be the closest challengers for Red Bull for the rest of the season. That gap is certainly closable. There's a nice English word. I think another factor that one also has to take into account is that Red Bull is restricted in terms of things like wind tunnel time and CFD computer work that they are allowed to do, because they are leading the championship, and also because they are the reigning champions from last year. So the amount of time that they are allowed in terms of the regulations is much less than teams that were behind them last season. McLaren where were they? Fourth, I think, last season. So they have had a lot of extra time available for development, and then that gets reset. I think it is on the 30th of June every year, and that depends on where you are in the championship at that point. But still, it is still more. Even though McLaren is now second in the championship, it's still more development potential that they have, time that they can spend, resources that they can spend in terms of the regulations on more developments. And the other thing is, and I didn't quite realize this, that McLaren has not brought that many upgrades to the car on track this season up to now, in contrast to Red Bull. And we've also said this before, is that Red Bull has probably reached the end of their development potential of the RB20, whereas the other cars obviously still have more development potential because they were behind. And that is why McLaren, I think, has more potential to close that gap technically to Red Bull, as for the rest of the season, for the next 10 races. So I think that is a big factor in that will benefit McLaren. And as you say, if they've learned their lessons on strategy and pit stop strategy and tire strategy and things like that, if they've learned lessons, it's fine to make mistakes, but don't repeat the mistakes. And let's see how they let's see how many lessons they have learned and how they are going to apply those lessons for the next 10 races. I'm actually quite excited more about the Constructors' Championship than the Drivers' Championship. I know a lot of people are more interested in the Drivers' Championship. But if you think about it, Max has now, I think it is, again, 78 points lead that he has over Lando Norris. There are 10 races left, so let's work it out. There are 25 per race available. That's 250 points. There are still 3 sprint races. That's at 8 points for a win. That's 24 points plus 250. That's 274. And then you've got the 10 races left with 1 point for the fastest lap each. So that gives you 284 points still on the table, with Max leading by 78 points at the moment. So everything is to play for, but that's going to mean that the gap has got to be closed substantially and pretty quickly. It's not going to work for Lando or Oscar or Lewis even, or anybody that is chasing him, to just close the gap by 3 or 4 or 5 points, or even maybe 7 points or something like that per race for the next few races. Max is in a much stronger position than that, thanks to his first 7 victories over the first 10 races. And the other guys have just been catching up. So, yeah, I think as far as the Constructors is concerned, it's game on, certainly. The Drivers' Championship, I'm not going to put money on anybody but Max at this stage in the season. If something dramatic changes, of course, that whole picture can change.
It's actually quite simple to catch up. Even if Max doesn't finish any races and Lando wins 3 of them, he's still behind. The gap is that big. So, but in terms of the Constructors, like you said, they can make that points difference up in 1 weekend. They've done it before. They made it up that quickly. So I just want to give some credit here to Zak Brown. When he took over, you remember those McLarens were devoid of sponsors. They had 1 sponsor a year, a couple of things there. They were in turmoil. Ron Dennis was leaving, and there was lots of politics. And he pulled everything together, and he's put the resources in place. And McLaren's got the most sponsors now in Formula One, if I'm not mistaken. Put in new wind tunnels. He brought in proper technical people, designers. He got probably the best driver combination in Formula One, and it all seems to be panning out now and paying off. The only thing they need to sort out is a strategy, and the rest will follow.
Yeah, and that's not Zak's job. That is that man that I can never remember the name from. The team principal. That's his job. He's got to sort it out. Thank you, Andrea Stella. I've been thinking about this name for weeks now, and I cannot come up with it, just like that. I don't know what it is. But anyway, so yeah, Andrea Stella, that's his job. Now, interesting, I mean, McLaren had to actually sell their technology center. They sold that technology center when they needed money, and they are basically leasing it back at the moment from the new owners. And of course, they also had a lot of investment by the shareholders from the Middle East. But yes, Zak is the man that brought that team, turned that team around from down in the doldrums that they were about 10 years ago. And he's turned them around. And good luck to him. I mean, great. It's fantastic to have McLaren back in as a competitive team. It's just good for Formula One. We've had Red Bull, we've had Ferrari, we've had Mercedes. We've had Red Bull now again. Let's get McLaren back. Let's get Williams back in the next 4 or 5 years. I would love to see Aston Martin back. Not back, but I would love to see them in the picture. And Lawrence Stroll is certainly trying his best to try and get that team. They are occupying or moving into a very, very impressive facility next to the Silverstone track at the moment. Not quite finished yet. And Stroll has been looking at appointing the correct senior people in the management, and there are very strong rumors that Adrian Newey might well join Aston Martin if he decides to go to another Formula One team. That's another subject for maybe another day.
Yeah. There are also the rumors about Max maybe joining them, but I mean, that's completely pie in the sky, I would think. No, you're right. And while we're on the subject of legacy teams that we want to do well, I think Aston Martin, I would love to see them do better. I think the wind tunnel is coming on stream, I've heard, somewhere in September this year. It's going to start working, if I'm not mistaken. But a team that we all need to talk about, any discussion of Formula One without talking about Ferrari is an incomplete discussion. They seem to have
Yeah.
started strongly, but they've been going backwards. The upgrades that they introduced, I think, in Spain, brought back the bouncing, and every adjustment or every fix they've tried to implement has made it worse. So, but I mean, with Fred Vassier there, you can see the benefits of clear leadership, like we just discussed with Zak Brown now. I think it will start paying off, and Ferrari might not bounce back this year, but give him some time. I think, especially in the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, they're going to do well simply because it's there. They'll do whatever it takes. So I think Ferrari maybe not exactly where they want it to be, but definitely also on the way back. So I think for next year, it's going to be very exciting. I'm just a little bit concerned that in 2026, we're right back to square one again, and there's somebody that just emerges as a clear leader, and everybody else needs to catch up for the next 6 or 7 years.
Well, I mean, we have to wait and see, but at least now by 2026 we will have had, what is it, 5-6 years of the budget cap, and I think that leveled the playing field a little bit as far as the development of new cars are concerned. But anyway, that's a very technical subject. I'm not going to try and pretend that I have all that technical insight. But anyway, yeah. The thing about Ferrari's upgrade seems to me, I think I've mentioned it in a previous broadcast, seems to be that the floor that they brought in to give them more downforce was so effective that it basically, let's put it this way, it stuffed up their suspension system. The suspension system could not work together with a new floor. And that has led to the bouncing problem, or the porpoising problem that they've had in the last few races. They have too much downforce for their suspension system. So what they want to do is to try and beef up their suspension system to work better with the floor. And that is not that easy. You and I have spoken before, and we are certainly no experts on this, but you have the push rod suspension, you've got the pull rod suspension. I don't know which one Ferrari has, but they are looking at getting the other one. So that is probably where their solution lies in terms of sorting out their bouncing, because this is not going to help them at all at a place like Monza. It's not going to help them at all at a place like Baku on the main straight there. If you start bouncing at high speed, you've got to back off. You can't go that fast because all you have is the bouncing. And what you want at Monza and in Baku is that at least down the straight in Baku, you want minimum drag, maximum downforce, so that you can get the top speed. So Ferrari's got a bit of a conundrum. They've lost their technical man Cardile,
Aston Martin.
To Aston Martin, as we've mentioned before. So Fred now has to sort of fill that role until he's got a new technical director. So I think Ferrari is a little bit, let's say, treading water at the moment until they've sorted these problems out. So that's why earlier on I didn't really want to count them in terms of serious threats for Red Bull in either the Constructors' Championship or either of the two drivers for a drivers' championship against Max. So yeah, Ferrari, I think, treading water a little bit, but as you say, one always has to be one should never write off Ferrari. They tend to bounce back when they get written off.
No pun intended.
Maybe then one should, yes, then maybe one should write them off so they can bounce back.
Yeah. Like you said, they're only 20 points behind McLaren. 21 points behind McLaren. So the gap to them and to McLaren and to Red Bull is smaller than the gap to Mercedes. I think Mercedes is the further 100 points back. But Mercedes seems to have found the solution. They might not be all the way there, but they're definitely on the right track there.
Well,
I wouldn't write them off. Yeah.
I think the graph is rising for Mercedes. I don't think the graph is rising for Ferrari.
No, you're right.
So they may be close to McLaren, Ferrari, but if your line is sort of leveling out, then that doesn't help. If the other guys are rising and you're doing that, then you're not going to close the gap.
I don't think it's leveling out. I think it's going downwards. That's my opinion.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Hendrik. It was interesting. We'll talk again next week after this race is finished and looking towards the Italian Grand Prix. But I want to see what happens this weekend if Max puts Red Bull back where it thinks it belongs, and whether McLaren can take the step up and start really challenging for that Constructors title. I'll talk again next week. Thank you.